On our earth, before writing was invented, before the printing press was invented, poetry flourished. That's why we know that poetry is like bread. It should be shared by all, by scholars and by peasants, by all our vast, incredible, extraordinary family of humanity. That was Pablo Neruda. I'm Bob Holman, and this is the Poetry is Bread podcast, where poetry challenges us, makes us think, and with imagination and courage, changes the world. Okay, today we got with us in our studio Eileen Myles, who needs no introduction. Still, how do we say hello to them without mentioning their Bostonian accent undercutting their global sophisticate imprimatur, not to bypass the books piled up amongst us, maybe 18 at last count, not including the early Mimeo jobs with the Steve Levine covers. And their next, the new one, the anthology, Pathetic Literature. Well, we can talk about that. Their run at the presidency. And of course, most Hollywood starring their poems and character based on their self. And that was also maybe some extra work. Did you ever get on screen there? You were.
Oh, yeah, no, I had about 3 cameos, 3 or 4. Yeah.
Did you have lines?
I had lines. I had lines. Yes.
Well, anyway, let's talk about the madcap puppet show that you did on her way to Marfa, The Trip. You got to see that online. Her second hometown there, Marfa. The activist work over the last few years to try to save our neighborhood park, East River Park, and the dogs. Mm-hmm. We must always mention the dogs. Her deep insight, voice. There. Thank you. I got it. I'm working hard at this.
I know, you're doing good.
Okay, yeah. All right. The love of the dogs. Please welcome Eileen Myles, dear poet.
Hey, Bob. Hey. Very glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, I think that the part that I first stopped at was the Pathetic anthology coming up, the new stuff.
Right.
So when does that kind of come out?
November 15th, which happens to be Ted Berrigan's birthday. So it's all connected.
Happy birthday to Ted, who once said about you that you're the last of the New York school.
Mm-hmm. I know. Very,
yeah. So it sort of pulls up behind you there.
Somebody's got to kill it.
Well, you like doing that, don't you? It's the change. I mean, you sort of you were pre on this disruption thing. Mm-hmm. You were I remember when you disrupted a poetry reading I gave by handing out pieces of paper to everybody that says, "Please boo and hiss loudly."
Right?
And all of Bob's that was completely disrupted reading. I loved it. And of course, running for president. But let's get back to Pathetic. What's pathetic about poetry?
Well, poetry is pathetic. Come on, poetry is pathetic. I mean, it's like being a poet is like being a lesbian. It's like if you meet somebody at a party and they say, "What do you do?" They say, "I'm a poet." You go, "Huh." It's like, it's kind of, you didn't tell them that you own this building, or you do, though I think you probably do own this building.
Well, that's another story, and it's not me, but.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a very funny, it's not a profession. It's kind of a vocation. It's something very unclear and very special and very, very deep and very rudimentary. And so I think that most of what I love, whether it's queerness or poverty or sudden riches or bicycle accidents or dogs or parks that are really vernacular, are all pathetic. And it's just like there's a, capitalism always wants to make everything be clear. And my favorite quote about everything is Chris Kraus said that because capitalism is insincere, it wants its fictions to be sincere. And I think pathetic is not sincere. It's messier than that, know? And so I think I just came upon it a few years ago, maybe even 15 years ago as an organizing principle. It was already in the art world. Guys like Mike Kelly and those people were doing cutesy, weird, unmasculine things. And I thought, well, and they were calling it pathetic masculinity. And I thought, what would that mean in literature? And I thought, oh, me, all of us, the work I love, the people I love, And so I taught a seminar in San Diego for pathetic literature. We had a pathetic conference, and it remained in the back of my mind as something I would do one day. And during the pandemic, it was the perfect project.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Pathetic time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Pathetic Literature is the name of it. It's coming out.
Kafka's in there. Chester Himes is in there. Sadia Hartman is in there.
Wow.
Alice Notley. Valerie Solanas. It's a very weird
Wow.
crew.
What Chester Himes.
Right?
And Valerie Solanas. There's a pair.
Yeah. So it was like who belongs together, who you never thought of that way before.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Try making your lineages out of that.
Mm-hmm.
It have to include everybody, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. It has no boundaries, So there's going to be a thin volume in the future, perhaps called Too Pathetic.
Yeah. As far as poetry and a job, I'm thinking about that scene in the Inferno where you talk about the guy who carved the ducks.
Oh yeah.
And who had a sign on that said, "Never worked a day in my life," or something like that.
Yeah, never worked a day in my whatever. Yeah. And that just was the puzzle and kind of the.
What he did was carve ducks all day,
which he just loved.
Yeah. And so it's sort of where you decided you were never going to work a day in your life. And how's that turned out?
Well, it's a beautiful lie, right? I just feel like most poets and artists that I know are total workaholics while having this pose of being deeply casual and never working at all and really relaxed and, and so it's both true and completely fraudulent.
Right. So,
but I do love what I do.
The job of being a poet.
Yeah.
So why don't we read a poem?
Okay. I have an old one right here, which is called 1980, the Year of the Ox.
Sounds like a great way to start.
Which I think I'm an ox. I think you're a tiger, Bob, right?
I think I'm a rat. I'm a year older than you.
Oh, or I thought you were a year younger. How old? What year were you born?
48.
Oh,
yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody's keeping track.
I accuse other people of doing that all the time, but here I go. I was just in this room where one friend of mine just quit smoking and this guy was smoking Camels and another woman was smoking ginseng. I laughed at her and asked for one. 2 women were walking around the juicer. One wasn't bad looking. The other was sort of yellow or orange, sallow, scary. I thought she looked like death. I thought, that ain't health. This year I discovered it's fun to have a body, something to be vain about. I knew that when I was 19, but somehow or other I forgot. Anxiety gets sexy to a point. Then I'll start drinking and smoking or something, but at least until then, I'll let the barometer rise. The energy gets me around. I'm into being a day animal. At night, I can slow down and look out of the corners of my eyes at the night. It's a scurrying animal, I think. Feels like a bat sometimes or any very dark bird alternately sailing towards and against light. I suppose I'm looking for a woman rowing in the old night boat. I like the dark water, trying to imagine where you'd go tonight, or else just throwing my head back, watching the sky, wishing I can eat all those flowers.
Okay. So you're just in this room. What a way to start a poem. I was just in this room, because just, which is a word that I think is just overused just so much.
Right. You just can't stop saying it, right?
But I was just in this room is, allows that the marvelous ambiguity of poetry to exist right there. I was just in this room. I was, or I was in there a minute ago.
Right.
And from there, the reader gets to take off and get your impressions of it. But by starting with that kind of doppelganger meaning, that's the way I think it's just standard for you to have that as a way of working.
I think it's specifically vague.
Let's remember that, folks. It's specifically vague, and it gives the reader. I'm a firm believer in the reader writing 50% of the poem.
Exactly.
And so you guys got to, here, especially with Eileen reading it, you've got to take that on through the ear, get through the wax that has been collecting for decades, and let not only the meaning but your meaning in on this,
and wanting people to feel like it's their meaning, and it is, because they, like you say, they start making it up instantly if it's somewhat comfortable.
That's the other thing. I mean, and you're very good at that. I mean, that it's a friend of yours who just quit smoking, and a guy smoking Camels, and another woman was smoking ginseng. I mean, it's just automatically brings you in on something that's anti-poetry. It's, although
how is it actually? No, how is it anti-poetry? What do you mean?
Well, it's just a bunch of people sitting around talking.
Oh yeah,
and that's that vernacular language is not what is thought of as poetry, and especially when you get the juicer in there, which happens pretty soon thereafter, and you got a juicer going for yourself. They're walking around the juicer. So we got a bunch of health nuts smoking. It's just kind of the volcano is starting to erupt here with these memory touches through an actual photograph of this thing.
And the thing that's so important too is it feels like, even though, like this, the poem is the room, and it's so funny because I feel like when I look at the poem, I think of everything about that time and all these people and everything that was like everything just before the room and everything after the room and everything that came in and out of the room, and it's just like the only real room is the poem. And it's so funny, and that's the goal, is to capture that feeling that you just walked in and now you're just going to walk out, and it's just this little puddle of time,
A marvelous little puddle with you're looking for a woman rowing in the old night boat.
Right.
Now, where's that come from? That the rowing in the old night boat.
I mean, God, I don't know.
What a perfect rhythm, huh? Rowing in the old night boat.
Sounds like a song, right?
This is like you, who are such a fucking modernist, there's like an anti-song, the way you break it up. And yet so much song in what you're doing. You really harken back to the orality of it all.
Well, I think before the poetry, I mean, what was I listening to in high school and college was like that moment of Joni Mitchell and James Taylor and Tim Hardin and Tim Buckley, and there was just these like really great lyric songwriters, who I mean, that's who I wanted to be. And when I came to town to be a poet, the whole she tapes her regrets to the microphone stand. It's just like I thought I was a singer, except that I was, like not singing, a minimalist singer, but it always is a song. And, I never got, and when I was growing up, I never got the blues. I never got all the great blues singers were singing in Harvard Square when I was a kid. And I was like, I don't know, howling, what. And then, now meaning in the last 20 years, I was like, blues. You mean the simplicity of blues, and it's just like a new thing rushing into the poems. And songs have always been like much more of an influence even than poetry for me.
Yeah, well, we should get to that, where poetry became an influence with you. But I'm still stuck on this rowing in the old night
Mm-hmm.
boat. It goes back to row, row, row your boat in the nursery rhymes.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes all the way through with Drunken Boat. And then, of course, Diva Motica in that press. Isn't that called Night Boat?
I know. And I did that in that moment. I thought, I wonder if they got that. I mean, I'm sure they didn't, but I loved it in that moment to think of it.
It's in that world of poetry, that swirl of poetry,
And also, and one of my books is called Sappho's Boat. And
this book that this poem comes from is called Sappho's Boat. Excuse me.
And so, and that really is about something that I thought of as my poetics at the time, which was really like dipping your finger in the water and just making a mark that vanishes, and it was just like, I was just so interested in Sappho and how we have it and we don't have it, and there's holes and there's all this
the
loss.
Fragments,
And it's just like, and I don't know, it was just kind of this movement that I was trying to make happen in the poems without, like hitting it exactly, hitting it kind of. And
Another one of those sort of specifically vague. What was it? Let's go back to that. I can't even remember what we said.
Yeah, I will never.
Get the footnotes out, folks. And write in and tell us what we said.
Vaguely specific.
Yeah. There it is. Hitting it off to the side, which is what you do with the rhythms in a song. When it gets the syncopation flows it. Not the 4/4 meter. But the syncopation that flows it. I like the dark water, trying to imagine what you'd go tonight, or else just throwing my head back. Now, what is that? Or imagining where you'd go tonight, or else just throwing my head back. Now, that's not an or thing.
What do you mean?
Well, or is imagine where you'd go tonight, or where you were last night. That's an or, equal. But you have where you'd go tonight, or else just throwing my head back. I mean, it's always you, I guess, is one way that, we are anchored in Eileen Myles, in an Eileen Myles poem, which is a room, which is a boat.
Which is a dream. And so you're kind of I trying to imagine where you'd go tonight, which is still not really chasing them. It's just imagining where they'd go. And while you're doing that, why not look at the stars,
Which is why you could eat all those flowers.
Exactly. Which then becomes very sexual, right?
Yes.
I mean, I always think that's kind of like, that's the dirty line, which is not dirty, It's sort of like it's anybody's.
It's flowery. Now she's talking about the poem, about a poetry poem. It's all those flowers.
I gotta say, in the subway, it was just like, what's the line? The pound line was written in big letters, like petals on a wet black bough.
Yes.
And then crossed out was wet and black. And I thought, wow, that's interesting.
At a station at the Metro,
At Second Ave.
Right. Those faces in a crowd, petals on a wet black bough. But it's just petals on a bough.
Because they just, but the wet black really stayed there, but it was the update from our exact moment. And it was just like, it was kind of reframing the poem and leaving it there too.
Oh,
it was great.
The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls.
Oh, indeed.
So that made me think of this poem of yours that I love so much called You. How about letting us hear that?
I would love to. I'm bravely eating my croissant at everyone. I'm living on my wet board. I'm living on my money, limits set and the lights lower. I worship the blue marks on the hydrant. How like the name of a flower.
So this poem was written, I don't know, 30 years or so after the was it?
Oh, okay. Good question. 1980,
Right.
2015. So
80,
35,
yeah.
35 years later.
And we're still ending a poem with flowers.
Right. And it sort of sounds.
What's going on, Eileen?
I don't know. I will say, I just feel like when I see a poem that I still like, I just think they're just all connected to all it. It's almost like you're only writing in one time. And when you write a poem you really like, you're in that time again, because I feel like the same person wrote these two poems. I mean, the other one is a little busier. The room's a little busier, but this is outside.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, it's also, that other one has your lines are short, but they're not short like they will become. And they're not short like in You, which is basically a line. I mean, there's lines with one word. Most of the lines have two words.
Mm-hmm.
This is generally the way Eileen Miles poems look. Generally,
mm-hmm.
These, for a while now, they just fall down like a waterfall on the page. Here they come. Get out of the way, because they mean everything and they're splashing all over the place. This poem to me seemed, first of all, once again, the opening is just killer. Like it's just, you sit there and it just comes to you. You're like, I'm bravely eating my croissant at everyone. Come on. What are you doing?
Right. I think you're being in love.
Oh.
I think you're being in love and you just can't do anything wrong. You're just like some smiling fool walking down the street eating a croissant thinking, isn't it great? And it's just like, they may not care if this joy is being thrown at them, but you're just in it,
Oh, I can see those crumbs washing down your lapels,
mm-hmm.
Oh, beautiful.
And then the you is the thou, of course, the person that I was loving.
Do you write poems 2 people, 4 people?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if I know who I'm talking to, it's like the pump is really on. That's pretty great. I think it's funny. I'm like in an anticipatory mode right now because I was asked by a gallery to write some poems for a painter. And I thought, being asked to write poems, you know what I mean? Or just like 20, they wanted 20 poems. I was like, what? And I decided they were sonnets and I wrote them fast as I suffered and thought about it and looked at the work, but then I wrote them fast as hell. And then I suffered for a week. And then I decided to make it even harder. And I wrote a Spencerian, a Petrarchan, a Milton. I wrote all the classic rhyme schemes. And so I wrote 5 more. And then I sent them this morning and they were so excited. They haven't said a word. I'm just freaking out because I sounded like I love them. And I thought, oh God, did I come down too heavy on this young painter?
You know what it is?
Scared them.
No, it's the COVID, number one. And number 2, it's the digital. They probably haven't opened it yet. Come on.
She said she was printing it out right now and breaking it to her studio at 10 a.m.
And has said nothing?
And nothing by 10 of 10.
I'd be scared too. No,
I was like, am I going to get a kill fee for poems?
Yes, you're going to get paid the whole amount, but this is, that's the ekphrastic. I mean, people are so stunned that you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Ekphrastic being, writing art inspired by other art. Generally in New York, we do poems inspired by paintings, but it could be other stuff. And this actually seems like a painting to me, this poem, this love poem that we've now uncovered as a love poem. I worship the blue marks on the hydrant.
Right.
Seeing those blue marks on the hydrant, I mean, that's New York art.
Oh,
boom,
yeah.
There it is.
And in the right state, this city is so gorgeous, right? It's just like, that's what's so funny about living here is that it keeps changing all the time and you keep changing. But in the right mood, it's just spectacular, and it is. It's like you're just to say what's there is to be a painter.
Beautiful. How like the name of a flower. The blue marks on the hydrant, how like the name of a flower. Are you really talking about hydrangeas?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'm talking about Charles Olson because he said, I like a word that still has dirt on its roots. And so to me, I look at hydrant and I thought, it's just all watery. I mean, it's such a great word. It's French. It's like Greek. It's just language. It's just the whole history of language is in that word. And it's just like a fucking fire hydrant.
Spraying out on a summer day.
Yeah.
As you walk past it with your crumbly croissant and you're on your wet board. Are you surfing there?
No, don't you? I don't know. Do you have a wet board someplace? Or it's a whiteboard, actually. But it's alternately, I think it used to be called the wet board and then it became a whiteboard. But
thank you for that.
But it is a poem. I mean, so I do live, of course, with these lists in my house that are several. I'm always writing. When I do it, I erase it. I feel great and stuff. But the thing is, it's a poem, and so I think in a way, I'm living on my wet board. It's like this. I'm living on the list. This is the list, and thou and thou and thou and. So I didn't even know that's what I meant, but it is what I meant.
And also I'm you're living, the poem is living on this wet board of a piece of white paper.
Exactly.
Here,
Yeah.
Coming into being. So No Poems. How'd you come up with that title for No Poems?
Well, right away, it's problematic because I think that we are. Let me read the poem, and then I'll.
Okay, good idea.
Yeah, so the poem's called No Poems, and it even has 2 quotes hanging around it. So, meaning somebody said it, right? It was a little golden cross, wooden like a ruler, really, wrapped round with pink flowers. Then Anne, she put a small cut glass vase of more pink flowers. She leaned across the hole. She couldn't quite. It was awkward, so the monk took the vase and placed it for her at the foot of the cross, and things were even more so. There was a hole in the ground, and in it the can. We were invited to take a handful of dirt, earth, the name of our planet, and throw it on our friend whose burnt remains were in the can. It felt good, cold, strong, old, a handful of planet. Here, I thought, and wiped my hands on the brown bandana Duncan brought. I wiped the dirt from my hand. My friend was buried under a tree. A little cross stroke of sun hitting its shiny gold. We stood in a circle, the friends, the monks, brown. One monk lifted a spade and shoveled it in, earth to fill the hole, and now he was gone. We stood. It was pretty as a picture, and he was taking photographs, the whine of the camera, and then we stood still. We'll probably come back, said Duncan. Huh, that's what I was just thinking. So that's friends standing at a grave. That's mostly, well, it's poets, and it's like Anne was Anne Porter, wife of Fairfield Porter. Jimmy Schuyler was the poet who was being buried on the ground of a monastery where Tom Carey was being a monk. And David Trinidad, the poet David Trinidad, was standing there, and that's what he said over the grave. He said, no poems, meaning Jimmy was gone and we weren't going to get any more poems from this guy, And I even think that when he saw that I used it and I didn't give him credit, he was huffy. But I think that's the way he rolls, huffy. But Duncan, and I did truly pick, because Duncan is Duncan Hanna, a painter who was a friend of mine and ours, and Duncan just died very suddenly, and that is him. He was a handsome man and he was a dandy.
Right.
And he always seemed to have the right thing. And it was very peculiar and special and even painterly that he had a brown bandana at the grave when the earth was brown. And he just had the thing to hand you when you had dirt on your hands. And it was just beautiful and just apt. And that just, just a little joke at the end of the poem for me was like, what is it?
poem from the floor.
We'll probably come back, said Duncan. And he meant, of course,
We'll come back to the grave.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
and that's what I was just thinking, but I was also, of course, thinking about reincarnation.
Yeah.
And it's all swirling around that hole in the ground, where we will all go. It's
into
like
our little can when we cannot. Yeah.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. It's your poem.
The can was Jimmy, of course. He became, we buried the can, but we came on the Long Island Railroad to Little Portion Friary, which is where the burial happened. And we kept thinking that we were going to leave the can on the train and kept thinking how funny and how horrible that would be if we forgot Jimmy and left him on the train,
Yeah. Well, also at a funeral, there are those people who say to the poets, please, no poems. We're going to, this is going to be, we don't want to go in that direction. Now, this was a funeral for a poet, and so it wouldn't say no poems.
Right,
but,
right. How awful.
Oh, yeah, it is. Well, that's why it's pathetic, what poems are doing.
No, because we want to go in and mess things up and feel around.
And take, I love the way that you come back on Earth a couple of times and make that connection to, you're taking a handful of it, but it's our planet. Earth is Earth, It's no getting around it.
It's so weird. It's so weird that is the name of our planet. Does everybody, somebody recently said to me, China is not called China to people in China. That is not the name of the country. And I thought it's just that particular category of names of things that are particular to those who actually are there.
Yes.
And so to all planets, does whatever Martians called Mars, is it, the air? Is
right.
it, what is it?
It would be interesting to find out what Earth is in all languages, because we know that it is terra and terre.
Seems like
it's so in the Romance languages that we know, yes, it is. But is it that way in others? I'm a firm believer in calling places
Turtle Island.
Oh,
different.
Yes. Huh. And Turtle Island.
Well, that's not Earth, though. That's just, is it North America, I think?
Or it's also just off of Kipps Bay. There's a Turtle Island there. But yes, I think that's what what the continent was called by various people.
But did they know there was anything besides the continent? Maybe they meant the world.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the elephant standing on the tortoise shell, balancing pivot, wobbling pivot, but balanced. In Wales, the country is Cymraeg, which means us, the people, which it does in so many places.
Oh, how nice!
But the Saxon, when the Saxons came in, they named it Wales, which means the other guys. So when we're calling Wales, right. We're calling the other guys, not the people there. Anyway, you could get lost in that.
Right.
And what do countries call themselves? Let's at least call them what they want to be called. Mm-hmm. That's the future, folks, where we're going to give, the old names back. This is the way that the photographs, when the photographs come in at the end of the poem, they whine. The camera whines there. What a great verb to pull out. I've never heard whine be used for a camera. The click becomes a whine here. And fighting against it, or bringing in that R of documentation, or bringing in mechanics into it, as well, of course, as the pun that you get with it.
Pun? Which pun?
Have a drink of wine.
Oh. Yeah, never thought of that.
Don't want it.
No.
Throw it out. You have taken that vagueness too far. There. That's what I was just thinking
We're back to just again.
again. But it's we'll probably come back.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, and the way that can resonate at the gravesite.
Mm.
No poems, all poems. And you worked with Jimmy for years.
Yeah.
How did that fit into the education of the poet?
I mean, I think that was such a huge piece, but it was more than anything. It was the fact that happened made me know that I was on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I first came to town, I mean, like almost immediately I discovered his work, and it made so much sense to me, and it put so many things together because it felt like a children's book, and it felt like, very clear, good language, and then there was something mad and magical about it, and and as soon as I got closer to the people who knew him, I heard that I would never meet him, and that he had, he had mental illness, he struggled with, his being, and so, and then standing at a poetry reading at St. Mark's Church, whining about being broke, and Charles North saying, "Well, there's a job you can have. I don't know if you'd want it." And it turned out to be the person being kind of a version of Jimmy's assistant. I was his assistant, but I was an assistant who also doled out his drugs because he was on some meds that he had a tendency to take all at once and burn up the house and stuff like that. So so he was in the Chelsea Hotel, and I got hired as the young poet to spend 5 hours a day, 7 days a week for a period of time with Jimmy. And it was just like to be suddenly put in that proximity with the person you had only hoped to meet sometime.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did I meet, I was in the room with him.
Definitely in the room with Jimmy Schuyler.
Yeah. And so it was just in a way, the education was, maybe I would see how, no, I didn't see how he would write. I would come in and he had written a poem and he would show it to me and I would show him poems. But the education really was just like his whimsy about things, like I would pick up a book, everybody sent Jimmy books and they were all over the floor, and I would pick up a book and he would just say these one-liners about, I don't know, I think she's a little too much, babe, and just quips. And he just was that kind of gay or that kind of literary character. And it was such a kind of a camp introduction to another generation, and even just seeing that you could have judgments like that, and just they would just pepper the day.
Wow. That's an education.
Yeah.
And plus the clarity of his writing, his descriptions of gardens and flowers. I mean, he was a master at giving the precise description, which then could be carried out into any kind of metaphorical place you wanted to take it,
and into any kind of genre he wanted to be working in. His diaries, his art writing, his novels, his poems, they all do this wonderful thing. And, his diaries, there's just, this one passage where he's just describing a wind going through a room and through a house. And it's like it's like better than a painting, better than a movie, how much that one little breeze touches. And, few writers could do anything resembling that.
Yeah. Freely Espousing.
Uh-huh.
Jimmy Schuyler, one of his great books.
Yeah.
Just, again, this a method, a way, of taking on the world. For him, it was freely espousing.
But to meet him and to meet him at that point in time made me know one thing, which is that I was lucky. And it's like you really need to know that at certain points, right?
So what was it like the first time you met him?
Weird. I think he was not well and lying on his bed, and he had very long hair and could barely talk to me, could barely look at me. He didn't quite know what this deal was they were cooking up, and he didn't quite know what gender I was either. I think I think he thought I might be a cute young boy. I was like in my 20s and a little hard to read, maybe especially if you were looking in a particular way, and so it was very awkward, our getting to know each other. So it was over time, and it was never comfortable. I mean, it was, like it would be comfortable in surges and then uncomfortable and then silent and awkward. You really had to, the filter was Jimmy's consciousness. And so you just had to be around that and see how it would let you in.
So, and how did the job end?
I mean, I think he had an episode that I decided I was not the person to be there for that. And it was too much. I mean, well, the idea of anything 7 days a week is too much.
Yeah.
And certainly, and I was young, and and I think I was going to Naropa. Literally, I was going to Naropa. I was going out there to do a reading. And so somebody had to replace me for a month. And then I came back a little bit, but I really never came back. And that was kind of pretty much the entree of Tom Carey into Jimmy's life, which he was very happy about.
Right. Yeah. So, as long as we're on the subject, what was the job that you took next? What was it that you did before you started getting paid to, although there's a way in which being Jimmy Schuyler's assistant is a poet's job, and Tom was somewhat of a poet too.
Sure.
So,
I mean, I think I worked at I worked at Books and Company before that for a while. I got fired. And then, because I knew too many people and I was too chatty, and the woman who worked, it was like a Xerox heiress owned it. And she was very, anyway, she just was very curating about how she wanted people to be around her in her bookstore and so on. And she was the important one. And so it was bad that I knew so many people. She didn't like that. And then I think after Jimmy, I worked. There was a feminist, lesbian. There used to be a newspaper in the West Village called Majority News in the heyday of like
the underground press.
Yeah, gay liberation and lesbian feminist institutions and stuff. And so the paper folded, but part of its infrastructure was a distribution company called Majority News. And so on Gansevoort Street, they had like a, just a, what do you call it, a garage. And then they had all these old postal trucks that were painted pink. And it was like basically a women's, like, so you would go there in the early morning, and we sold music magazines, political magazines, and gay male porn. And competed. There was a big news distributor called Hudson that went to all the newsstands, and we also went to all the newsstands with these alternative File, In Our Time, and Rolling Stone, and it was just kind of, so it was cool. Like, so one person drove the truck, and the other person was the jumper. And that meant, they would pull up at the newsstand, and the jumper would jump down with whatever their order was and run up and drop it off. And we would just drive around the city. And then at the end of the day, everybody would go to the bar and get drunk, and everybody was having romances with everybody else. It was great. It was it was a cash job. You just got paid at the end of the day, and then you would go drinking.
So this was, end of 70s? We're talking
yeah. 79, 80. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Classic. You and your pink truck.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that must have led straight into your professorship at San Diego then.
Directly. There was, it was right on the CV, and then the next thing was professor.
Next thing that came for you was working at the Poetry Project, I guess.
Yeah, 80s. That was 80s.
That was 80s.
Yeah. And that in its own way did lead to the job at San Diego, because they believed me to be an organizer and a person who did things.
Well, it was,
true enough.
Yeah, true enough. Exactly. That until the MFA Ponzi scheme arose, it was very hard to get the credentials of being a poet, to get one of these jobs. So, Joel Oppenheimer was the first director of the Poetry Project, and before it, he'd been a printer, reminiscent of Bob Hirshon and the Print Center and all that. And Joel was a wonderful poet and wrote that column where he never used capital letters in the Village Voice. After he'd spent his 2 years at St. Mark's, he became a professor at City College. So once again, you had a way of doing that. Now, of course, it's a different world.
It's always a different world, right? So it's not that one.
Hey, let's get back to the poems.
Yeah.
Here, okay.
Yeah. So I did go to San Diego in 2002, and I went with a girlfriend, and this is a love poem that I wrote her, and it's called "Each Defeat." Please keep reading me, Blake, because you're going to make me the greatest poet of all time. Keep smoothing the stones in the driveway. Let me fry an egg on your ass, and I'll pick up the mail. I feel your absence in the morning and imagine your instant mouth. Let me move in with you, traveling, wrapping your limbs on my back. I grow man, woman, child. I see wild, wild, wild. Keep letting the day be massive, unlicensed. Oh, please have my child. I'm a little controlling. Prose has some magic. Morgan had a whore in her lap. You big fisherman. I love my friends. I want to lean my everything with you, make home for your hubris. I want to read the words you circled over and over again. A slow skunk walking across the road. Yellow, just kind of pausing. Picked up warm laundry. I just saw a coyote. Tippy, tippy, tippy. I didn't tell you about the creature with hair, long hair. It was hit by cars on the highway. Again and again. It had long gray hair. It must have been a dog. It could have been ours. Everyone loses their friends. I couldn't tell anyone about this sight. Each defeat is sweet.
I never saw it as a love poem. I guess all poems can be love poems. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
this is in love or this is after? I mean,
no, this is in love.
This is in love with each defeat.
Yeah, let me move in with you. Your limbs,
the Blake
your
line. I love the way you introduce your poems. You go into them as if it's just something you're saying, not the beginning of a poem. But your poems don't seem to begin. Let's put it that way. Because somehow you're walking in the middle of it. Please keep reading me, Blake.
Yeah, well, there's a silent thought. You're living a life. And then you're in a situation and somebody's behaving a certain way. And then you think, please keep reading me, Blake, because you're going to make me the greatest poet, of all time. And it was like, okay, that begins something. It was almost like there's a silent thought and that triggers the poem. And then I have to write the poem that thought would, that thought just opened the door.
That certainly is a love poem. There's no greater gift than somebody causing you to be the greatest poet of all time. All you have to do is read me to Blake.
Right. Well, it was true. I mean, I guess I did read Blake in graduate school for 10 minutes, but it was just like, and I think maybe she was getting a PhD, but none of those things being related. She just was currently into Blake and just was, can I read you one more? Can I read you this? It's so great when somebody just throws literature at you,
You've got rhyme in this poem.
I get rhyme all over the place. Have you noticed?
I have noticed, and I want everybody else to notice it too. These people who just see your abstract breaks and things like Morgan had a whore in her lap, you big fisherman, I love my friends, going in three different directions at once. At least they seem to be three different directions. But there are times when it settles into rhymes, tippy and tippy, tippy, tippy.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, we get back into that sonic place of song, there. So help me.
Yeah. Oh, help me. Help us. No, I think the thing that's weird is to be a poet and to have a career and to survive and keep making work for years. I think you helplessly get branded as something or other. And then that becomes the way you get read. And all the other things that you do just kind of are jogging around in there. And it's sort of, I mean, I think we all have this problem. It's sort of maddening. I'm the punk poet.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't, and that's just a way of saying all these things about me that are biographical that don't have much to do with the work at all, except that I might say something suddenly sexual or, whatever. I might change register and go into one that's regarded as earthy or dirty or
Right.
suddenly. I do it suddenly, and that's what's disturbing.
Well, that's why that's why we have line breaks, so you can do something suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's but you have all the tools of a poet at your disposal, and you use them all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that nobody sees them, reads them, knows them, or they're too busy seeing Eileen Miles all over them to get tippy.
Mm-hmm.
Or a poet never repeats a word in the poem, right? You teach this at and all of a sudden hair is here 3 times in 3 or 4 lines. It's what is that section there? How does that go?
Long gray hair,
and then it's well, there's 3, isn't it? Oh, yeah. A creature with hair, long gray hair, but it's not, you're not allowed to do that.
But Gertrude Stein taught us to do that, and we can take that and then not be her. It's just like repetition means there's more there. And then it feels like it's metonymic. It feels like a real place. It's just like you put a little dirt on the page.
Yeah. It's allows the real spoken, the real hearing. Again, the real spoken cause you to really hear. As people think they get perked up because it's brand new, but in fact, you perk up when it's familiar, and then you can have a chance for the surprise, but you gotta have the familiar in there.
Because the familiar constructs agreement. And once we agree, we can go anywhere.
That's what a poem is all about. Just to agree with that these are the words on the page, and it's a gift. It's a gift economy. The poet, we don't, certainly not going to make the money, although you say, and what was it, this one or the last one, where you say that you're figuring out the money. Maybe that was the last poem. But anyway,
it was on my whiteboard.
There it is. Your whiteboard. You give it away if it's a poem. You're lucky. You certainly aren't going to have anybody putting it up over the sofa and looking at it. No. Yeah. So one of the rhymes here is child with wild.
Yeah.
Again, more repetition in there.
And that's so fun because that's so rock and roll. I see wild. It's really fun to say and to do.
Keep letting the day be massive, unlicensed continues that rock and roll. It's I don't know what the rhyme is between massive and unlicensed, but it is, and somehow completely
the S's, I think.
There it is. The S's do it. The sibilants.
And then the child comes back.
The child has to come back. Oh, please have my child. And you did it in the reading in a way that I'd never heard before. I have been controlling. I'm a little controlling. You really dropped into a different character at that point to do it.
This is a very hard poem to read because the rhythm changes so many times, and I think that might be the best I ever read it, because I've always felt like it's just so hard to have too much physical energy, and so you kind of slalom over the changes, and I don't want to do that. I want to nail each one, and for some reason, sitting here with you, Bob, I was able to be in it, which is great.
This is great because it moves to next. This is where Morgan had a whore in her lap. You big fisherman, I love my friends. And that love your friends is going to come back later with when this creature, which could have been a dog, suddenly turns into everyone loses their friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like does a, you know, it is the context of the poem create something that is deserved, or is the language of the poem something that is there to mess up the context and break it open into a new meaning? Am I making any sense at all?
Absolutely. No, I'm listening. I'm following you.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, then that's a question. What do you think?
I mean, both.
Both.
It's got to be. I think the poem is changing the locks. That's what you're doing all the time. You're establishing a new order, and then you're breaking it before you go.
I couldn't tell anyone about this site, and you've just told everyone about this site.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Well, it's true. You're speaking to everyone as opposed to anyone. You know.
Each defeat is sweet.
So fun to say. So fun.
It's a Shakespearean sonnet.
It's kind of Shakespearean, right? I know. Thank you.
No,
this is a very formal feeling poem. I mean, I've written a few, but yeah.
Okay, folks, it's called Each Defeat, and you can find it in your local poetry store.
Mm-hmm. It's in a book called Sorry Tree.
Oh. And the Sorry Tree really predated your hands-on work with trees at the East River Park.
Well, it was like when I owned a house for the first time in San Diego, and one day I bought a lawnmower, a manual one, and one day I mowed the lawn, and it was just so hard. It was so much hard work. I never wanted to do it again. And I remember at some point I went backwards, and then I bumped into this little tree, and I remember, and I thought, oh, sorry, tree. And I saw a cartoon, you know what I mean? Like I was a cartoon. And it didn't do anything except title the book.
Oh.
But it was such a kind of funny, it was the moment, it was that moment in my life. It held, Sorry Tree really held that passage of time.
I just can't stop thinking about the way the city came in and cut down the cherry trees while they were in blossom.
Oh, people were out on the street crying, neighbors, people who had lived there for decades. And it was just like they followed those trees every spring, the cherries. And all over the news was cherry trees are blossoming all over New York. And in New York, you noticed how the very nature of the media is to cover crimes, because like the New York City Park Department was madly tweeting about how the cherry blossoms were in bloom. I was like, wow, you're cutting ours, and people there were just tears. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. And it wasn't just that, it was like really the sound of all those trees. I mean, I ran, we talked about it. Like last fall, I was suffering because I wanted to be there and fight the good fight. And then I just wanted to get the hell out of here. And I just wanted, I wanted to go to Texas and write, related and unrelated to the stress of this park and the danger and all that. And there was this one, and you said, wait, what did you say? Wait until the end of November, or wait till December. There was, you kind of, after the holidays, after Thanksgiving or something, you kind of proposed some deadline, and it was very arbitrary. I was like, Bob's right, I'll do that. And then, so that's what I was doing kind of. And then there was a reprieve. There was a moment where we got a restraining order.
Right.
And it was like, oh my God, we got it. Because all we need is 6 months and we can win. We can, and it was just like, and they just drove right through it.
Yeah, they did not obey the restraining order that the city itself had placed on.
No, the Supreme Court, the New York State Supreme Court, and even the very judge that did it was then. We went to him with contempt, and he was like, "Well, I guess it was really academic," and they had gotten to him. It was clearly the one judge with some courage, but and so I guess. So then I was all ready to leave because we were safe, and I packed the car, and then we were unsafe, and I was like, It was like the horrible,
And then when the press finally covered this with your actions and the hundreds of people who were spending their time out there, amazing organizing again, from you and others. It appeared in the New York Times in the styles section that a poet is speaking out for trees, as if there was some kind of Joyce Kilmer.
I know.
It was just so upsetting that, again, while I think there's a lot of irony in your pathetic stance for poetry, it's also so true that nobody gives it the time of day, in so many ways. Same reason why Eileen Miles is read as Eileen Miles and not this poem in front of you. Same way the Poetry Slam is discussed as a phenomenon that takes on poetry and athletics rather than who are the poets and what are the poems meaning in this, But reading about the demonstrations and actions in the style section was just, what's the right word?
Yeah, but just too little, too late. It was just like so ill placed, but the reason I say all this is because, like, I couldn't bear to watch the cutting begin in December when they began it, and so when I came back, that was the only time I literally saw it. And what I saw, besides the cherry trees being cut, was like these big, it was a 120-year-old London plane tree, and it's the sound of it was a percussive event that you have never heard before in your life. It was like, I've heard that, like, the sounds that sailors hear on ships that mostly crashed, and like the few sailors who survived to say the sounds they heard of a storm at sea is something that nobody's ever heard. These are sounds that just are not unbelievable. And the sounds of trees, a giant tree, first they lop this off on that big branch, and then this bigger piece of the tree falls, and all these different clucks and clunks, and it's just like, it was so like your own body, if they had this partner on Earth, it was the sound of that. It was one of the worst sounds I'd ever heard before, and it was music. It was a dark music, some bad, and there was such kind of weird cheeriness among the men who were doing it too. They really loved it. They had said to my friends, "Happy Earth Day, girls."
Well, it's a death of macho.
I mean, macho is dead. So any opportunity to
celebrate.
Yeah.
Have we got another poem here someplace?
I think we've got it. Hey, wait a second. What tree am I waiting? Would that be, or the more upbeat, Put My House?
What tree am I waiting? Okay, Put My House. Yeah, Put My House.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a lovely poem. Oh God, this is an epic. Yeah.
And this is a very pandemic poem. This was very much about having a partner someplace else and trying. Here's a proposal, right, having the long distance relationship during the pandemic.
Yeah, why don't you just try this?
Right, I got an idea. Put my house inside the boat. Can we do that? Put my dog inside of your dog. Put these birds inside of yours. Put your ocean all over my mountains. Put my mountains in there. Put my dog in yours. My dog walk is safe inside your dog walk. Let me eat inside you. Let me eat your food. Let me eat your house. Put your house inside my dog. Put your dog on my boat. Naturalize. Put my heart in yours. Put my mouth on your mouth. Put my hair in yours. Let me breathe inside you. Let me smell your guts. Put your boat in my eye. Let me eat your friends. Put these hours inside your hours. Eat this bird. Cheep. Eat my dog's foot. Eat that ocean. Run to him or the ocean. Run to them. Hear these birds cheep. Fly to me. Eat my foot. Put my house inside yours. In your mind, think me fly. This fly me home. Love me now. Forget your phone. Eat my heart. Run to him or the ocean. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Dog growl. Cluck, click. Put my house right in there. Yeah, that's me looking out the window. Look at me. Bark, bark, bark. Put your heart inside that bark.
Oh. Well, did it work?
No, no. I think she didn't
shoot.
even quite get the poem. Maybe perhaps the only person I know that didn't like that poem.
Oh.
It was like, I don't know about that poem. I was like, yeah.
I guess she.
We were done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was done.
The communication was not succeeding.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I love the way you change it up when you put my ocean, you write. And it's the only place in the whole poem where you get one line, oh, that's not true. Look at that. There's also let me smell your guts, which we can also talk about, but because guts really does change it up. Oh my gosh, where's that vocabulary come from?
Uh-huh.
It ain't no house, it ain't no boat, ain't no dog, and ain't no walk, ain't no hair when you get to guts. Put my ocean, you say, and then you put your ocean all over my mountains. You're you're just giving it away.
Mm-hmm.
Even your ocean, you're going to take on her ocean.
Mm-hmm.
What about this ocean stuff or the ocean? Where's that?
Bobby V.
Oh.
I'm a huge Bobby V fan.
Really?
And I think again, during the pandemic, I was listening to all sorts of music, and I realized there was a CD set of like all of like a label rarities or something, and they had all of Bobby V. And I was reading about him and thinking about who he was, and I was very into him as a I guess it was probably junior high, and he was cute. He was very cute, and he was from Fargo, North Dakota. And I even wrote him a fan letter and sent him a little piece of parchment paper. Would you sign this? And it's like, to Eileen from Bobby V. But Bob Dylan not only is a huge fan of Bobby V and played with him.
What?
In Minnesota, they were like, yeah, and I think he really, he's a really kind of country-ish pop singer, and a real good singer and interesting musician and songwriter and all that. His hits are, Take Good Care of My Baby, Run to Him. If you think these lips can kiss you better than my lips can kiss you, run to him or the ocean. Yeah. So it was just like that, just bled in, which I wasn't sure if it worked, but now it feels totally part of the poem.
Absolutely works in there. And again, it's an anti-Miles of song and romance that slays in there. Put your heart inside that bark. That's me looking out the window. Go, Eileen. Well, this is the one that reminded me of that one that I didn't know which one reminded me of that one. That one about flying and cool, right?
Oh,
cool
yeah.
and bright, because there's so much flying inside this one. Put that flying in there.
Right. You want to?
Yeah. Could I hear cool and bright?
Can't find it. Do you have it?
I just happen to have it right on top.
Excellent. Here. Amazing. Cool and bright. I stand up as I do in my poet's shack and piss. The toilet's black. An orange moth does its last couple of flaps. Flap, flap. Pissed to death. It could be no worse. You flew.
Who knew? This sounds like Marfa.
Yeah. I do have a black toilet in my little shack.
And standing while you're pissing. You're really a revolutionary, Miles. nails.
Rhino, I know. And I think that they ran that in the local paper, and I think that people were very upset. Nobody told me, but I just got like weird vibes. Like, oh, what was that? Oh, you know? I was like, wow.
Yeah. Well, you know, that no problem with that moth, you know?
It was about the moth.
Yeah, it flew.
Uh-huh.
You know, doesn't matter what you do.
And also, it was the masculine gaze. It was something I probably wouldn't have seen any other way, right?
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. That nails it. That's definitely that flip flop is, you know, will turn Marfa on its ear. Love turning New York City on its ear. Hard to do.
Very, very hard to do. Yeah.
Have you got that other one over there?
What, the little guy? Or which?
The little guy.
Which
one is that? What tree am I waiting?
Oh,
I think
should we go there?
I think it's the only. I think it might be the only one we got left.
Well, there's the mask too.
Yeah. Mask. Okay, your call. Where you want to go?
Let's see which.
Mask is such a great. You know, you've done a lot of COVID here.
COVID was so good for me for poetry. I mean, I just wrote so much. I wrote more than I'd written since my 20s, I think. Just like.
What do you think it was? Just the fact that you had to be inside? Or was it?
Yeah, I was alone a lot, but in a good way. And I just had time, just untrammeled time. It was just that thing that you want as an adult and hard to find, you know, and I was just in it. And like, you know, my whole relationship to Marfa had been like coming and going. And so I never saw the seasons actually change. And it was just amazing seeing things grow and the birds suddenly coming out in spring. And it was just beautiful. It's great. And lonely, you know. I had some people there and we would go for walks.
Yeah.
But it was me and Honey in the house.
Sweet Honey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honey doesn't fly.
No, she's never flown. And I don't think, I've only heard I've heard bad tales about dogs in general flying, but also bad tales about pit bulls because they're very, you know, I think the shaking of the plane has made some pit bulls very anxious and they break their teeth on the crate.
Ooh.
You know, they just can't handle it and they're like trying to get out and they're scared and I just wouldn't put her through that.
But Honey must have been sweet company during that COVID time.
Yeah, no, she liked it. She liked it a lot, you know.
Dogs were happy.
Wow, what to do here, Bob? Okay, let's do the tree. You know, I actually think honestly, why don't I read the two? Because
just read them both.
Yeah, one's. So here is what tree am I waiting? That whole part of the world where I won't go anymore. See, now this actually, okay, now I realize this poem is hard for me to read at this time in my life. I don't know why. It's like go to a really dark, deep place. And I'm not sure I can go there.
Well, it's your decision. You don't have to.
No, let's not.
You know, because what was so great was once again, that whole part of the world where I won't go anymore. I mean, the way you read that to me, I thought you were just telling me that you were describing what the poem was going to be. You're telling me a little anecdote there, like what you do. You love to do that, you know, to just fool us, you know, that everything could be the poem.
Right.
Including this introduction to the poem, which isn't an introduction to the poem, it's simply the poem, you know. But if you're truthful to yourself and it's that part of the world where you won't go anymore, then I'd suggest that you're not.
Yeah, no, because it was like I could say that whole part of the world, I could say that, but where I won't go anymore, suddenly I was like, ooh, you know. So okay. Let's this little guy here.
Bye. Let's get on to the mask.
Okay, I kept the mask on because I thought I looked good. This restaurant really needs a candle, and like it heard me, a plane passed overhead.
Well, this brings me right back to that to the revelation at the end of No Poem at the Duncan Hannah.
Throwing the head.
And there's throwing your head back too,
yeah.
as opposed to where are you going? I throw my head back.
But the Duncan, what's the Duncan?
Well, Duncan, it says one thing. It's very, here that resonates with you because you were thinking the same thing, except it was totally different.
Right.
You were thinking the same thing, except you were thinking on a cosmic level. Not we're going to come see Jimmy again. Mm-hmm. And here, this restaurant really needs a candle. And like it heard me, a plane passed overhead. Like a candle.
Also, had a little red light on the plane.
I get it. I thought you were just standing there and sitting there eating away, and you heard a plane go over.
No, I thought the plane was like a candle. I was like, here's a candle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, really, either way.
However it works.
It doesn't. That's the whole point.
That's really funny.
Is that great simile where the two halves, like Einstein always says, E equals MC squared, But when you use the like in the simile, you don't, it's, it's because the universe is expanding and it's the poet's job to push it out there further. Or something like that.
Mm-hmm. The Big Bang is wrong. Have you heard that?
No.
They've discussed, yeah.
Was it a little bang?
It was like, the fly is not staying closed. This is a problem today. Apparently, it's older. At the Big Bang, maybe that happened. That's how this part of the universe, but it's way bigger and wider than that. So the boundaries, they have not found the boundaries. They're not right. It's not. And it might change everything, and people don't know what to do with it.
Well, I think it's about time.
Yeah.
I think, it's all in Webb's telescope. I mean, those are such incredible photographs.
The ones of...
Isn't Webb's?
Webb's.
WBB.
Is that
WBB.
a particular telescope?
The one that they've just launched a month ago or 2 months ago.
Right. And they're
sending back the photos.
And people are dying. And I haven't seen them.
You haven't seen them? Well, don't look at them because it'll change your whole way of looking at everything. They really are spectacular, and it really is different. Those black holes, they're just a part of it.
Yeah.
It's not like it's going to eat everything. So I think you're right. It's just one particular part of the multiverse.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that we're here. We know that.
Well, let's keep telling ourselves that.
Exactly.
Eileen. It's been a joy to do this here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Bob Holman, and thank you for listening to Poetry is Bread. Subscribe to our podcast to get notifications of new episodes, or check us out at BoweryPoetry.com. The podcast is co-produced by Ram Devanini and Flavia Roja with Rataplax. The podcast series is funded by the Citizen Diplomacy Action Fund, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State with fundings provided by the U.S. government and implemented by Global Ties U.S. in partnership with the Office of Alumni Affairs and the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Additional support from New York State Council on the Arts, Governor of New York State Kathy Hochul, and the New York State Legislature. See ya.